So I spent 10 days living with 15 other people, but we weren't allowed to talk at all through pretty much the whole experience. No talking at meals, no talking as we passed each other in the corridor. And really, we had nothing to do all day, every day, for 10 days. And I'll be honest, I was terrified at the prospect of this retreat and that space and silence. But it was one of the best things I've ever done. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Derek, and for the last 3 decades I've been helping people explore faith and growing in the faith, and in these videos I share tools and techniques so that you can live a deeper and a more meaningful life. And so I decided to go on a retreat. I thought it would be good for my spiritual life, good for my soul, and I found this 7-day retreat. And I was like, come on, Derek, you can do this. Let's stretch yourself a bit, take a bit of risk. On the west coast of Wales, in Barmouth it was. And so I applied to go on it. And I got this reply asking how old I was, and I told them how old I was. And they're like, you can't come on the 7-day version of the retreat because you're too old. That's just for young adults in their 20s. You need to come on the 10-day retreat. Now, 7 days was like a massive stretch for me. And so I messaged back, I said, 10 days. I said, I don't think I could last for 10 days. And the priest who's running it, he replies to me, said, you'll be fine, trust me, we've done this with loads of people, just come. And so in a moment of madness, I was like, right, okay, here I am, let's do it. And I had like no idea. I should have really asked what was going to happen, but I had no idea. I thought it was a retreat, so I thought there'd be like some maybe silence and meditation, and I certainly thought it would be quite reflective. But we got to the first meal, and then the guy who's running it explains about this silent retreat, and then he explains that after the meal we won't be able to talk to each other for 10 days. The only time we could talk was at mass, if we were reading the words at mass, and you met with a spiritual director for 30 minutes on a morning, but apart from that you weren't allowed to talk through the whole thing. And then I was like, oh my word, what have I signed up for? I had this kind of panic rising inside me, and I scanned around as if everyone's going to protest, but obviously everybody else knew what they'd come to. It was only me that had kind of stumbled into this. And so I had a panic, went to bed, and I was like, what am I going to do? I'm totally freaking out here. So I knew what I would do. That the next day it was in the west coast of Wales, so I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll get up after breakfast and I'll go on a massive long walk. I enjoy walking, and that's never too difficult for me to have space when I'm walking. So I went on a massive long walk, and I made sure it was really long because I didn't want to come back and have lots of space and get bored and freak out and stuff. So it was this massive long walk, and I came back just before tea time, and I was like, phew, we can eat at tea. And I've managed to fill in day 1. I've only got 9 to go. But honestly, I came back from that walk and I was so tired because I'd made it such a long walk. We'd had tea. I was really feeling a bit rough afterwards. And then I had this realization. I was like, actually, you've come on retreat, Derek. That the point of a retreat is not to kind of hide in other activities. It's to make space for God and make space for rest and get in touch with yourself and all that sort of stuff. And so I was like, right, day 2. I'm not going to fill it with massive long walks and run away from the boredom. I'm not going to run away from the space. I'm going to just have some guts, have some courage, and I'm going to face in to the space of each day. And so I get up, have breakfast, and every day I'd meet with my spiritual director 30 minutes. And then after that, just the day of nothingness would span out in front of me. But truly, it was the best thing that I've done in a long, long time. Let me just tell you about some of the things that happened. So the first thing that I noticed, and it happened after a few days. It took a few days to get to this point, but gradually I started to slow down, not just in my like outside self, but in my inside self. That like when the moment is all you've got, you start to fully experience the moment. So I'd meet with my spiritual director in the morning, and I'd think, right, okay, I'll sit and pray, and I'd pray, maybe read my Bible and that sort of stuff, maybe journal, write stuff down. But then I'd look and it'd be like 11 o'clock and I'd still have hours and hours till lunchtime. And after lunchtime, I had hours and hours and hours till tea time. And after tea time, I'd have hours and hours and hours till bedtime. And it would just look like this vast space. And so I realized I couldn't just plan out all the minutes because I didn't have enough to fill it. And so gradually over the days, I just started to slow down and I just started to live a bit more in the moment. I just started to experience what was in front of me. And so I remember one time I just like walked down to the seafront and the waves were crashing up against the side, and I had nowhere to go. I had nothing to do. So I just stayed there and just looked at them and just observed the waves and was just fully present. I'm not very good at being fully present because I've got ideas and things to do and all that sort of stuff. But because I had nothing, I learned to be fully present a bit more. And I remember one time I was having lunch and I was making my sandwich. The lunch, you just made your own stuff. It was all laid out and I made a sandwich, etc. And I picked up a peach and I was like, oh, I'll grab that. I'll go for a walk along the front again. And I was walking along the front and I took this peach and I had nothing to do. I had nowhere to go. So I might as well just eat this peach. And I might as well just fully experience eating this peach because I've got nothing to do. I've got nothing to watch. I've got no things to do. And I just remember eating this peach and just fully experiencing this peach. Now you're going to think I'm really, really weird, right? But it was just like, it was like all my senses were on hyper focus on the moment. And I was just like, wow, this peach, it's like the best peach I've ever tasted. But I don't think it was the best peach I've ever tasted. I think it was just a peach. But so often we just skip over the food that we eat. We hardly remember tasting it, do we? But in that moment, I was fully present. And when you're fully present, even ordinary things can have a sense of sacredness about them. The second thing that really struck me, as I said, I was going through a really rough time when I went on retreat. Things were difficult at home. They were very difficult at work. And I went on this retreat and I had so much buzzing around in my mind, and I'd meet with this spiritual director for 30 minutes. And normally, like if I'm talking to people about their problems or if I'm sharing, it takes hours to get it all out and cover everything. And I'd meet the spiritual director and I'd throw a few things out about different things at work and things people have said and all the horrific stuff that was going on, and expecting my director to be interested, to want to like gossip about it and to ask me and we could talk. And she never would do. She would just listen. And so quickly I would just like run out of things because I didn't have very long. And then after about 20 minutes, she would just pause and we would just sit in silence for a few moments. And then she'd say, I think you should read this Bible verse. Or she'd say, do you know the story of, and she'd tell me a Bible story. She said, I think you should just think about that. And it made me think a lot that talking is really good, but essentially what she was doing is she wasn't going to get involved with gossiping about my problems and talking about it and what she said and he said and this and that and speculating. She was just ushering me into God's presence and saying, actually, just spend the day with this Bible verse. Just spend the day with this Bible story. And she didn't feel a need to be the Messiah for me. She kind of trusted just to usher me into the presence of God. And that's made me think a lot about how I help and support people that sometimes I get in and I try and fix it. But maybe what I should do sometimes is just direct them into the presence of God. And one time, you know, in a sense, I loved getting these Bible verses and stories to look at because I had the whole day nothing to do. So having something to do, read this verse, and every day I'd get a new verse or a new story, and I'd only look at it for an hour or something, but at least it gave me something new, something novel for my day. I remember one day I went to her and I talked about stuff and shared it, and again she sat in silence and she looked at me and she said, I think that you should stay with the same verse. And I was like, no, I've spent 24 hours with that verse. And she's like, yeah, I'm not going to give you a new one. You're going to stay with the same one. And the one she's told me to stay with, it was a story of when Jesus gets baptized by John, and he gets baptized. And as he gets baptized, it's like the heavens opens and the Holy Spirit comes down. And they hear this voice where God says, this is my son, whom I love, and I'm really pleased with him. And that's the story. And I'd read it for a whole day. I mean, there's only so many times you can go around the same verses. I remember panicking. But I was like, smiled politely, said thank you. And went back to looking at that story. Looked at it for a few minutes afterwards, pretty bored with it. There was nothing there. I'd already read it. And a bit later, I'm walking down to the seafront. And I'm heading down to the seafront. And suddenly, it's probably one of the closest moments I've got to God speaking in this audible voice. And this story of Jesus getting baptized by John, and this voice saying to Jesus, you're my son, and I love you, and I'm pleased with you. And in the moment I was walking down and I wasn't really thinking about anything, but I sensed God actually took those words to Jesus, and in that moment he spoke them over me. He said, "You're my son, and I'm well pleased with you, and I love you." And it was almost audible. And at that point I was on retreat. And I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't helping anybody. I wasn't teaching anyone. I wasn't being a good father. I wasn't being a good church leader or a teacher. I wasn't doing anything except wasting time on a retreat, talking to no one. And God had said, I'm really pleased. I remember stopping. I literally walked down. I just stopped and I looked up. There's people around, so they probably think I'm weird. And I was like, how can God be pleased with me when I'm not even doing anything? I'm just wasting time on food's getting fed, food's been given to me. I'm not really doing anything, but God is well pleased. And I just felt God like smile as the penny dropped that actually you please God by just existing. That you please God by making space for him. You please God when you take one of his creations, a peach, and you just go, wow, this is really good. That you please him by being his son and daughter. You don't have to be active. You don't have to be doing stuff. You don't have to be earning stuff. And I was like, yeah, God's really pleased with me. And that gave me loads to just ponder and think of. And at the end of the 10 days, I came back to normal society, more civilization, back to my job, back to my family and stuff. And it was only when I come back and I looked back on those 10 days and I was like, I don't remember being lonely. I was like, what? I was alone for most of the time. There's other people around, but we couldn't really talk. I had a little bit of contact with family, but not very much. But most of the time I was on my own. And it was only when I come back, I was like, actually, I don't remember being lonely. And it was almost like strip everything away, and I panicked at the middle. I was terrified of the boredom and the space. And it's almost like you make massive space and God comes and fills it with his presence. And it's like, is it possible that God's enough? Is it possible that God is enough for you and me? That genuinely, when he comes and fills us with his presence, that actually that's the thing we were made for, the thing we hunger for. And when we fill it with everything else, our loneliness and our boredom and our dissatisfaction, our discontentment comes not because we've got stuff, but because we have got stuff. And that comes in and crowds out what we were created for. I mean, it might be that you can't make space for 10-day retreat. I understand that. You've got responsibilities, all that sort of stuff. Even the idea terrifies me right now. But you could probably make a space for a little mini retreat this week, couldn't you? You could take half an hour and go for a walk on your lunch break. You could Saturday morning just create a 2-hour window and say, actually, I'm not going to allow my phone or Netflix or anything to crowd into this time. I'm not going to try and be super spiritual. I'm just going to give space. That when you eat your lunch, you could actually just try and be present to the peach and eat it. It did really change my life. I can't say I've carried all the lessons, and even now as I'm talking about it, I'm remembering actually I need to do more of this, of connecting. But maybe that might inspire you about what is possible, that in the moment we can experience God. And if you really want to learn a bit more about prayer, then check out that video where I talk about how to start praying even if you're not religious. And I'd really appreciate it if you could support my channel by subscribing and clicking the like. And I would love to know your comments. Maybe you've been on retreat or you're spiritually seeking God. Hit them below and I'd love to hear what you think. But see you next time anyway. Bye-bye.